Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Yaron Weitzman in the house from Bleacher Report. What's up, man?
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So NBA playoffs in full swing.
Yeah.
A lot of really interesting off-season things going on. And it doesn't matter what time of year it is in the NBA. There's always something to talk about.
Yeah, right. Kind of the. It's like we're talking about the Lakers this week and Magic Johnson more than the actual games, right?
I know. That's the wild thing, is that you can talk about everything off the court and you're like, wait a minute, like Toronto is playing right now, they're looking great, and then what's going to be of Golden State in the next round? It's like, can we just focus on the games for a little while?
Yeah, sometimes it goes both ways. I mean, that stuff probably helps pay my salary, right? Like, we care so much. Like, I bet if you looked at the hits, like for Magic Johnson's quotes, are probably better than like a Toronto pick and roll defense breakdown. But you kind of, I don't know. I do wonder if we're heading too much. It's a different, deeper question, but if we're heading too much in the opposite direction sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's got to be a little bit of both, because like what you guys do going like deep dive, next level and stuff, like that's awesome. But also going into the hysteria of the Lakers, like there's an outlet for that too.
Sure.
You kind of need a little bit of both.
For sure.
So let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers.
Sure.
You spent a ton of time covering them this year. You talked with Brett Brown in the past, Joel Embiid. When you look at their season, what do you make of how everything went down, and how do you evaluate what these guys did all year long?
Strange season, right? Like,
yeah.
Everyone remember when Markelle Fultz was starting? That seems like 5 seasons ago.
Forgot about that, right?
Everyone, it's crazy. So I'll give myself a plug, right? I'm writing a book on the Sixers in the process.
Nice.
And you're talking about this stuff and like the drama, and Markelle Fultz is going to be just a footnote, right? The number 1 pick who forgot how to shoot and essentially got banished to Orlando.
For next to nothing.
Yep,
right?
and no one's going to even remember that part.
Yeah.
So the Philly season, it's crazy, right? In the end, I think you have to evaluate it as a success. You got within, I don't know, a vent being closed of advancing, Kawhi's shot falling off the rim, and you advance into the conference finals. Brett Brown used a phrase, like, I forget what number he got up to, but he kept saying we have 3 teams, we had 4 teams. You had the Fultz group,
right,
the post-Fultz group, the Jimmy Butler post-trade group, the Tobias Harris post-trade group. That was kind of his way of covering himself a little bit.
Yeah,
and showing
trying to do a little bit of that.
Yeah, a little covering, if we don't go this far, we've had a lot of teams. In the end, I think if you look at it, I think it was a a tough end, but a successful season, right? You look at, everyone makes fun of the process and how many years it took. It was 2+ seasons, 3+ seasons of not winning. That they're already at this point, and their 5-man starting lineup, that group was, I think, statistically the best in the league when they played. I guess we'll talk about this, but if I were them, I would kind of bring everyone back, run it back, and see what happens. I think they're in a really good spot going forward.
And do you think they can make it work financially for Redick, Harris, and Butler?
Yeah, they can if they want to, and Josh Harris, the owner, has said repeatedly that he's okay with paying the luxury tax. Tillman Fertitta, the Rockets owner, said that also, and then the Rockets, when he first bought the team, and the Rockets then had to make moves to get under the luxury tax. So with these guys, and billionaires don't become billionaires who can afford buying teams by not caring about every dollar. That said, I do think Sixers ownership is funky. I don't think you can. They want to win, and I think they're invested. I would be very surprised if they say they're not okay with paying the luxury tax. And the answer to your question, yeah, if you have, not to get too deep on it, but when the guys are already on your team, you can re-sign them and bring them over and bring them all back if you want. And I think if they don't mess around and they offer them the contracts, basically max contracts to both Harris and Butler, I think they'll come back.
It's funny because if Kawhi doesn't hit that shot and they get to round 3, it could be a different conversation in terms of how we evaluate the season, even with Brett Brown, because people were looking at Game 7 as if he was coaching for his job. And then there were those people who thought, no, this guy's going to come back. So when you think about Brett Brown, between the process, between what he went through, how do you evaluate him as a coach? I think I'm sometimes more critical of Brett Brown than other people are. I'm saying that to say that I thought he coached really well in the playoffs. I thought he did a really good job. He made really good adjustments in that series. They changed their style a little bit. He went to Boban, everyone's favorite Boban, star of John Wick 3. Some Greg Monroe was in that series?
Yeah, Greg Monroe, right?
Yeah.
He put Embiid in the Raptors series. They put Embiid on Siakam. They made little adjustments. He gave Brett Brown has said for years, essentially, pass is king. They don't like to run pick and rolls. They like to move the ball around. In the playoffs, he changed that a little bit because it wasn't working. Jimmy Butler was their best offensive player. I mean, Embiid, but it's a different kind of player.
Yeah.
Started running more pick and rolls. So I thought Brett Brown did a really good job coaching, and I thought that was I thought the blame not the blame. I thought the hot seat was unfair and unwarranted. And the thing that's important to point out, I think, on that is it didn't come from fans being crazy fans. That came from the ownership, right? The owners were Josh Harris, the owner, was the one who said, yeah, we'll have to see about his future. He was asked point blank, is he going to be our coach? And he said, he's our coach right now. people then afterwards, Josh Harris tried claiming that this was he didn't say fake news, but essentially pulling that card that this was
not a great look, Josh Harris.
that this was a topic of that this was a topic made up by the media. I mean, the reason there was speculation about his job was mostly because Josh Harris refused to back him.
Right.
It's a long-winded way of saying I thought he did a good job. I think it was warranted bringing him back. And I actually think he grew over the year. I think he had a little trouble at the beginning. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Balancing Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler. That's a lot of big personalities, a lot of different personalities, a lot of clashing egos. And when people say clashing egos, I think that there's often a negative to that, a negative aspect to that. And I don't think it's fair, right? It's not clashing egos in terms of these guys are jerks and they're not open to working with one another. It's that to get to the 1% of the 1%, which is what these guys are, right? 1 billion people play basketball in the world, 100 make the NBA,
right.
And these guys are the best of the best. Your DNA is going to be a little different, and to bring those kind of mesh those personalities is difficult. And I mean, we saw it even in Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler. Maybe we shouldn't give Brett Brown credit for that, but I mean, Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler by the end of the year, we're getting along really well, and we're there for one another. And I think that's huge for them going forward. Yeah,
for Butler, who had been the alpha dog on multiple teams, to say, hey, you're going to be one of the second or third options depending on the night. Like, that's a huge change for that guy. So yeah, when it comes to Brett Brown, you can make all of those different examples to say, this is the reason why things went down that way. And then you look at Ben Simmons, and it's like, the guy can't confidently shoot the basketball. So when you think about Ben Simmons going forward, what needs to change about his game? And do you think there are certain things that he can actually change, or is this just the player he's going to be?
I mean, the jump shots, right, the thing needs to change. It's not even, like you phrased it, confidently shoot. He can't shoot.
He can't even shoot.
He won't.
Like Giannis will take threes.
Yep.
He has no problem doing that.
I think the number was, I don't remember if it was the whole postseason or if it was just the Toronto series, but he didn't take a shot outside 8 feet. Again, we can check after, but it's like you got to be willing to take a foul line jumper. And I believe, and he's never said this, so I'm going to guess, but I do think that affects how he attacks the lane a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. People
compare him and Giannis a little. If you watch Giannis is going through people when he attacks the rim. He's not afraid of contact. He's going up and straight into the rim. Ben's flipping up some dipsy shots and off.
Right, these little sky hooks.
Yep. Yeah. So that could be maybe it's a style, but I wouldn't. I have a feeling it has to do with him not necessarily wanting to go to the line. So the question is he willing to admit, yeah, I have to work on this? And he's kind of tiptoed around that publicly. He doesn't like to be questioned publicly. So he says, after the season, he's asked about this. And the same thing happened last year. No, I need to work on a lot of my things. I need to improve my game. Just the cliches you expect from an athlete. Where I think it would have benefited him, especially this year, to say, yeah, you know what, the jump shot's something. We all know I need to work on it. That's going to be a focus. We'll have to see. I mean, who knows?
It was the same thing last offseason.
Yeah, that's the troublesome part, right? That he had the year off, which you can work on a jumper, fine, but you want to say maybe not then? Okay. Rookie year, he gets humbled against Boston. They build a whole strategy around him not being able to shoot. They pack the paint. You would think you come back after that and say, I'm going to work on my jumper.
The number one thing.
Yep, clearly it. He does work on it. His brother, and this is also the Sixers have his brother as his main shooting coach. Nothing against his brother, but that's probably something that you want to be doing in-house. You want to have a shooting guy or whoever your specialist is, or whoever's Brett Brown, assistant, whatever.
Right.
I understand there's a connection between you and playing a brother, and maybe that helps, but I don't know. I believe that that's family stuff stays outside, and you should be working with any organization. So again, we'll see, right? He's got to work on it. That's the biggest difference for him, and that's going to be one of the things that kind of decides how deep Philly can go in the next few years.
There's so many different fascinating parts to this whole Philly thing, because it's like the on-court product can be so great at times. Other times it can look just completely upside down. And then you throw like the Fultz thing in there, now Simmons thing in there, and then you look at Embiid, right? Like on a given night, he can look like the best player in the NBA, right? And then there's nights where he just doesn't have it. So when you think about what Embiid did this year, how did he progress? And how does he take the next step to say, I'm going to be healthy consistently, and also I'm going to be a big-time player throughout the season?
I mean, the conditioning's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
He's a little big. I mean, the biggest testament to Embiid, we can say he wasn't great. The Sixers lost the Raptors because when Embiid came off the floor, they hemorrhaged points. They were outscored.
Yeah, their plus-minus was
insane. It was
insane.
ridiculous. I don't think anyone watching could look it up, right? It was like 100. I don't remember what it was, but it was something ridiculous. That essentially
it never happened before, basically.
Yeah, and it was essentially like that became to oversimplify a series, but especially a series that came down to an inch of a ball falling left instead of right. Embiid coming off the floor, that was it. So it was like, okay, how long can Brett Brown go? How long can he play? How long can Brett Brown go without Embiid off the floor? Now, I'm not saying that's all on Embiid, because that's not. The Sixers need a backup center.
Yeah, they couldn't even put Boban out there for 3 minutes in Game 7.
It's not fair to ask a player to play 48 minutes,
no,
right?
Especially with a bad knee. But there were a lot of different little things with Embiid in the playoffs that, for your star player, you just want this guy to execute, right?
Yeah, you would like, we'll compare to LeBron, right?
Sure.
You'd like the LeBron type diet, where Embiid is that it's not Embiid. So like I did a story on.
He's not gonna be like Draymond Green losing weight throughout the season. Let's put it that way.
No, so it's telling, right? So I did a story earlier in the year. It was Landry Shamet before he got traded. The Sixers have a tradition that rookies bring Chick-fil-A they pick up Chick-fil-A at a drive-through and they bring it to the team plane before road trips. And Embiid has a standing order with whoever the rookie is, and that standing order. So Shamet, I went with him and I saw what he ordered, and it's 4 sandwiches, 4 milkshakes, 4 fries.
Oh my gosh.
So again,
dude, you got to cut out the milkshakes.
Right.
Come on.
I'm not saying he's having that every day, and I'm not saying like you can't have anything like that, but it feels like if that's in your, I'm going to say, even monthly diet, that's probably not ideal.
No, definitely not ideal.
So little things like that, I think, can make a huge difference. The other part of it, if you're actually talking basketball-wise, his pump fake, that's a big thing. Everyone loves his pump fake.
You wrote a story on that.
I did, yes. The idea of him learning how to take maybe like a second dribble from the three-point line. It's kind of when he takes a dribble from the three-point line, it's kind of like a runaway train, and that's where charges or turnovers come from. If he's going to be out there, he doesn't need to be like a point center, but just the ability to kind of slow himself down, read the floor, and make decisions off the dribble as opposed to just pump fake and go. And if someone's in the way, you're in trouble.
So you said you want to bring all those guys back. If the ownership group talks and says, hey, we're not going into the luxury tax, are there 2 of the 3 guys you'd rather have?
Tobias, great guy. Jimmy's better than Tobias, Jimmy Butler. You have to bring him back, and after what you did in the playoffs too, I think it'd be crazy if you don't bring him back.
Yeah,
I know that contract's gonna get ugly on the back end, but
playoff Butler versus playoff Harris, there was a huge difference.
Yeah, Butler, he was a great defender, right? He made Kawhi work. You also saw how good a defender Kawhi was because that made Jimmy struggle, but. They still, right, we talk about the Simmons jumper, and Embiid's great in the post, but you still need somebody who can create from the perimeter off the dribble, and Butler is that guy, and he's just better than Tobias Harris. It's not a criticism of Tobias Harris. I think Tobias is really good, and I love how he kind of fits in. Or he didn't shoot well in the playoffs, but I think he could fit in really nicely on that team, especially given an entire offseason and preseason to kind of work and train with them, and they can figure out who works well in what spots. But Butler's just more dynamic.
Right, and there's so many questions about the East, too, because if Kawhi leaves, Toronto suddenly isn't the same type of player. Milwaukee is certainly going to be a player going forward, but then you don't know what Boston's going to look like. Philadelphia can very easily make the argument to say, hey, we bring these guys back, we could be right in a position to win the East again next year.
Yeah, again, right, the starting lineup was one of the best, if not the best, during the regular season, that 5-man group at the end.
They played like 22 games together?
And, again, I'll oversimplify. If they have a competent backup center, they beat Toronto and they're in the conference championship, right? So if I tell you, take all we know this year, you have the starting lineup, you bring it back, and you get a backup center who can allow Embiid to take 5 minutes of break in the playoffs, and you're in the finals, right? Again, it's not that simple, but maybe it is. So I would run it back.
It'll be interesting to see. So it's funny how the NBA works because you can have a team like Philly that's right on the brink, or the Celtics. Things can change. Let's talk about Minnesota for a second because they were a playoff team not that long ago, and suddenly they have a new coach, new president of basketball ops. When you look at Karl-Anthony Towns, how do you build around a guy like that, and what do you like about his game?
What I like about his game, offensively, he's unbelievable, right? He's not quite, but the 50-40-90 club in terms of a guy who shoots 50%
right
of the field, 40 from 3. And I looked it up, couldn't remember, but he was exactly 40 from 3.
Wow.
Not quite 90 from the foul line, but 6'10", 11, 7 feet, whatever he is.
You'll take that for a big guy.
Those guys don't come, right? He's brilliant offensively. He's one of the best offensive players in the league. The problem is the defense, whether it's a combination of effort or I'm going to call it intellect, not that he's dumb, but just the idea, instincts, maybe that's a better word,
right.
Defensive instincts. They're not always there, and you can't, if you don't necessarily have one, you better have the other, and there are things you can do. And he improved last year in ways, especially after Thibodeau was gone. The scheme changed a little bit. That's one of Thibodeau's downfalls, aside from the Jimmy Butler stuff, was him not being open to changing the way his team played and his schemes, which worked, I guess, 7 years ago, whatever it was.
With the Bulls, yeah.
Right.
It was great, but it's 2018,
right, the league
2019.
changed, right. In fact, he deserves credit, right? The league changed, and teams changed how they attacked, basically because Thibodeau and how he built up the defenses that loaded up one side. But then he never, it's kind of like in baseball, the shifts, and he was kind of like the hitters who never adjusted to the
He's still
shifts
trying to
coming
pull
on him,
into the
right?
shift.
So, Yeah, so so Towns was better, a little better after Saunders took over. But yeah, you need the effort, and we'll see. We'll see. I'm actually curious to see with Jimmy out this year. Though my understanding is the issues weren't necessarily as strong between them as was made out to be. We'll see how Towns kind of takes over. I mean, it's on him now.
Right.
It's really, I mean, I know
it's his franchise.
Yeah, it's like an interesting question. I was talking about this with, I think, like before the playoff games with media friends. If would the Sixers trade Embiid for Towns because you have the health? Embiid's a better player, but you have the health. And vice versa. Would either of those teams make those trades? If like, who are you put ahead of one another if you were ranking them? And Embiid's better, but Towns is healthier and has a future. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
It's a very interesting question. I think another interesting question is, what does Andrew Wiggins look like next year and for years going forward? Because former #1 pick, huge contract. When you guys break down analytics, he's not an analytic-friendly player. So what are the parts of his games you like and you could see him improving? And what are the other parts where it's just like, this guy just doesn't make sense right now?
I mean, it's more the second defense, right?
Right.
Nothing against Andrew Wiggins, but he can't shoot. And it's just.
And he could be lost in games too.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wait, he's out there?
Yeah, so if you can't shoot in today's world, in today's NBA, it's really hard. If you can't shoot and you're not a creator for others, right? Then you better be like the greatest scorer, one of the top 10 scorers in the league, and he's not that either.
No.
So if you start putting those equations together, again, defensive effort. So yeah, in theory, right, he's got the body and instincts the body and athleticism to be a top defender on the wing. The instincts aren't necessarily there, and the effort's not always there. And so yeah, that's the ceiling, right? Solid scorer, great defender. I don't see either of those happening. It's a problem. That's one of the worst contracts in the league. It's a problem.
I mean, could they even get anything for him, trading him? Or is that contract just going to be an ender?
It'd be tough, right? I mean, I guess I wouldn't say nothing. Like, you never know. There's always the team willing to take a shot on a former #1 guy. But that's, if you kind of trace Minnesota and where things went wrong, obviously the Jimmy trade and how that was handled with Thibodeau and not trading him and him blowing up the practice and everything, that's obviously in there. The Wiggins max, and I'm not saying, it's almost impossible to not max out or extend your #1 pick, right? Or the #1 pick you trade for. But that's going to be looked back as a thing that really cost them. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just he didn't evolve and progress the way you would expect and hope.
Yeah, and also the nature of the beast. Like, Minnesota isn't going to get big-time free agents to come to their city, and they're just saying, hey, we have a #1 pick here. Maybe he'll turn into something. And right now it's not looking like that. But yeah, at the time you're thinking this will make sense. Unfortunately for them, it's like one guy hit, one guy doesn't. And same thing with Philly. It's like a couple of these top draft picks have hit. Fultz is not there anymore, and that's just kind of the way things go sometimes.
I mean, that was Sam Hinkie's argument, right? That you're going to have, I need lots of swings.
Right.
I'm going to miss. This is why you need lots of swings, because it's blackjack, essentially.
Yeah, and it's not going to be like OKC where it's Durant.
Right,
Westbrook,
I mean, you look back kind of, and it's funny, that's a good point, right? You think of other teams who've done it. That's an unbelievable rate.
Insane.
In terms of hit those 3 guys in the top 5. It's almost unheard of. I'd be curious to look and kind of see teams that have had a similar hit rate on their lottery picks.
Yeah, definitely not the norm. How about Saunders in Minnesota? Young guy. Did you like anything you saw from him? What do you think about the future for him?
It's hard to evaluate, right? They were also, Sarge and Covington were injured, and they were all recovering from the Jimmy. The team was recovering.
Just organizationally, a lot of stuff.
Jimmy took a torch to the place. And again, Minnesota contributed to that, right? They knew he wanted out, and they tried playing hardball, and they lost.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. So it's hard. The players love him. Minnesota loves him in terms of I'm not going to say the city, because I always find that funny when people say that, because I don't think John Smith, who, cared. Right. But just the team and the fans are a big fan. There's obviously the familial connection there.
Absolutely, yeah.
X and O's wise, I'd love to say, I can't pretend. I don't know.
No, we got to see. It was a very limited sample size.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the players clearly that's almost right. So Towns especially got along with him. The players clearly wanted him. Sometimes in coaching, right, that's almost the first step and the more important step. You can find assistants to be your schematic guys if you want. Especially at the step they are. Like, if you're talking about trying to get past a conference championship to a finals, then it helps to have a Popovich or Spoelstra or whatever. Before that, to get the first step, you just need somebody who the players can buy into, enjoy being. He can keep the atmosphere going, to not be completely overwhelmed X and O's. It seems like he's okay like that. We'll see going forward.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Now, speaking of a coach who made a major impact, maybe in a little different way, let's talk about Jim Boylan.
He's actually the opposite. Right? I think the two of them are probably the opposite. I can't see Ryan Saunders running a double, a back-to-back practice, a full practice after back-to-back.
Yeah, and then having the whole Players Council thing there.
Yeah, that was great.
And then he's still in town. I mean, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, well, the Bulls, It's funny. The Bulls
are something.
They
right?
should thank like the Lakers, the Knicks. No, Knicks I'll give. And I'm gonna get if any of my colleagues watch this, they'll give me some ribbing because I'll give the Knicks a little credit. But they're not quite. I don't know if they're quite Lakers level right now.
They're not. The Knicks are not the laughingstock of the league at this moment. And if it weren't for the Knicks and Lakers, like you're saying, the Bulls would be right up there.
Yeah, they really are, right? In terms of, and it's a similar thing where the same people have been ownership executives have been in charge there. So. I mean, that's what happens, right? Sometimes it's not a coincidence that the same things happen over and over. No, the Boylan thing's fascinating, but I wasn't around that team every day, so I can't say I know the day-to-day of it. But just, you report a little bit, you're around a tiny bit, when they come through, talking to people. That was, it got off to a really bad start, right? It was entertainingly so.
Oh, yeah.
But really bad. And then, like, the Zach LaVine thing where he offered to pay Boylan's fine money after the attack. That was came out. I mean,
that was quite a swing,
yeah,
right?
Someone who's not around them every day, and then you look up, you're like, oh, that's surprise. Okay, that's something that maybe I'm missing something here. I still just philosophically, I'm never one of these. I'm never pro at any level. I'm going to be the drill sergeant coach who's pretending, I'm running the Marines.
Yeah, it's not high school anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I don't think it ever works, right? I certainly don't think it works in the NBA, and I laugh when I think he kept referencing his Spurs connections.
You're like, dude, come on, let's pump the brakes here.
Which is funny. Brett Brown does that too. The people who are with the Spurs, they love dropping the Spurs.
You have to,
which I guess makes sense, right?
Budenholzer as well.
Yeah, it's like when we were in San Antonio, I was like, okay, relax. But, I got you.
It's like New England with Belichick.
It is, right?
If you're Romeo Crennel, Charlie Weiss, so you're just trying to.
That's a good comparison because those guys end up flat. Like they never. That kind of is all they got, right? So
you look at some of the other coaching trees that are more successful in the league, you're like, all right, this makes sense. These guys had a little bit more autonomy when they were working for their head coaches.
Yeah, so it's funny. Dropping the Spurs, the Spurs way, this you can, again, Popovich, right? Everyone's different. Popovich can get away with certain things other people can't for certain reasons. So
because he's won all these championships, won these games.
So Boylan come in and say, I'm going to do X and Y, because that's what Popovich did, and I know Popovich, and we're boys, and we had wine together a few nights on the road.
Right, and LaVine and everybody else would be like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
So just a weird team also, because you think about LaVine, think about Otto Porter, Lauri Markkanen. There are some guys there, but again, they just haven't put anything collectively together. So what do you like in Chicago right now? And if you're in that organization, who are you trying to build your franchise around?
It's a good question. So Markkanen's good, right? I guess when you say good with young guys, does that mean he's going to be a top 50 guy or a top 20 guy?
Right.
A top 20 is probably too high for him.
I think he could be a top 50 guy.
But you never know, right? Yeah. Markkanen's good. Wendell Carter, he scouts like.
Yeah.
Otto Porter's solid. I thought that trade was okay. It's okay to take advantage. He's under contract for 3 more years, so I know sometimes fans get hung up on max guy versus not max guy. It doesn't work like that. If we only give max contracts to the guys who are clearly like the A-list players, 6 players would get max contracts. Right. That's not how it works.
Yeah, there's going to be certain guys that are getting paid that may not be max level, but there's guys you have to pay.
Right. Yeah. So and he's one of them, and he's under contract now for 3 years. Them 3 I like. LaVine, he's brilliant offensively in terms of his skill set. Like if I told you, you can jump through the roof and drill, step back, and off the dribble threes, you're like, sign me up, right? It's again getting repetitive. Defense. Not exactly there, and that's and I'm overstating that. I'm understating that. Excuse me. So defense not exactly there. The passing not exactly there. And at a certain point with guys like that, I start to wonder. Okay, whatever year we're in with LaVine now, you got your paid. Is the turn not coming in terms of when you're going to start actually caring about the other side of the ball?
Right.
Maybe Boylan's the right guy, right? Maybe drill sergeant Boylan, and they're becoming boys. So I don't know. They need a point guard. They know they need a point guard, though they've kind of thrown Chris Dunn under the bus a little bit in recent press conferences, which is a little weird and maybe not the best way to endear yourself to
no, definitely not.
the NBA as a whole, right? Because it's small league, right? And you're dealing with the same agents, same people, everyone's good friends with each other.
And people talk, and they're like, hey, what's going on in Chicago? And if you're Chris Dunn or in Chris Dunn's circle and you're saying, this is not a good situation, other guys are not going to want to come.
Yeah, I don't know, I think Paxton said, we have starters at the 2, 3, 4, and 5 position, and that was it, and just kind of left Dunn. So again, I'm not sure about that. They need a point guard. Whether they draft one or sign one, we'll see. So, yeah, listen, we're making fun, in a vacuum. Markkanen, Wendell Carter, that's a pretty solid starting point. So
yeah, and it's the East.
Yeah,
going for that 8th seed. I mean, you obviously saw what Orlando was able to do this year. It took them a couple of years, and a team like Charlotte now, and you've written about Kemba Walker in the past in terms of his contract. There's a lot of stuff that's going to change the NBA this year, and I think that's the reason why we talk about the offseason is because even though the on-the-court product is great, so much is going to be different in just a matter of a few weeks.
Well, this year at least, like you laugh, we talk about the offseason every year, and then it's like Gordon Hayward's the prime free agent. Like he's solid, but is he really changing much?
Right.
This year at least, the hype should be warranted. Like it'll be consequential, the decisions that happen. You have a lot, Zion, KD, Anthony Davis, Kyrie, Kemba, Knicks, Clippers, Lakers. These are big franchises, big players. So Lakers, the hype feels a little warranted.
I think so. Yeah. And the Knicks are in the mix.
There you go.
Yaron, it's been awesome, man.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for coming in. All right, everybody. See you next time here on The Sit Down.